to the director of at the Academy of Ideas, former Brexit Party MEP, of course, and the author of I Find That Offensive, Baroness Claire Fox. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Kevin.
Well, first of all, this is genuine breaking news. It has just broken that Andy Burnham has now responded to Tony Blair's 5,600-word essay, which basically slams. It's just the headline on it is Starmer has been a disaster. Starmer's government never had a plan. Starmer's government is useless. He has various areas that he thinks need to be sorted out urgently, net zero. He says stop the boats, whatever it takes, and so on and so forth. So he basically, this former Prime Minister, Labour Prime Minister, is saying to the current Prime Minister, you're useless. Underpinning that, though, he makes this big point of saying, you know, the Labour Party seems to be deluding itself that by changing leader, this will sort all our problems out. In other words, if you get Andy Burnham, that will be fine. Blair makes a point of saying, no, that is a delusion. It's not about leader. It's about having a plan. It's about having direction. It's about sort of believing in anything at all, which Keir Starmer clearly doesn't. Andy Burnham, I'll get you the full details. He's just responded and said Blair has no understanding of what is going on. First of all, Claire, what were your thoughts on what Tony Blair said or has written about Keir Starmer's government?
So the last time I was on your programme, I made very similar points. And I'm not suggesting that Tony Blair plagiarised me. But in other words, I have a huge amount of sympathy for what he says, which is peculiar. And I know that you've been making this point this afternoon, which is I'm hardly a Tony Blair fan. And certainly the first half of his rather overlong essay actually clearly states the much more profound problem that Labour has than just the technocrat, useless Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister. And I think it's quite interesting that Andy Burnham says he hasn't got a clue what's going on, because he actually does have his finger on the pulse, I think,
clearly
of what's gone wrong with the Labour Party. I mean, the one thing he does understand is the Labour Party, and he can see that it's become a soulless entity. And he makes a very good point about how you can't just be a weather vane that just kind of blows in whichever direction the voters want, or your backbench MPs or what have you. It's like, what do you believe? Lay out what you're going to do about it and govern. And that's the one thing that we have seen the Labour Party failing to do, and it's being challenged. Starmer's been challenged by, would you believe, somebody who has already done 3 U-turns, and he's not even a Prime Minister, he's not even an MP, and he's given in on things which he held so close to his heart, like rejoining the EU, his very ambivalent and insulting comments in relation to somehow it was women's fault for making all this fuss about wanting single-sex spaces. Oh, nobody's changed his mind now because he knows that's palatable, and so on and so forth. So this guy is not a man of principle.
But he's not stupid, and I think he has hit the nail on the head about most of the things that are very, very wrong, or what have been.
I meant Burnham has got no principles. Sorry, let me be clear. I'm saying that's why Blair's right, and Blair is basically saying there's no point just having a kind of Starmer Mark II who just U-turns even before he's even got into power, and is kind of just trying to keep people happy. A people pleaser is not a leader. And Blair at least understands that you've got to have some philosophical belief in something, some sense of what you want the country to be like. And that's not anything we've seen from Starmer, and we're not being promised it by any of those challenging him either.
So, in a sense, this long essay by Tony Blair is an attack on both Starmer and Burnham, because he attacks the hell out of Starmer. I mean, he just says he's been useless on all fronts. And then says, but do not let not the Labour Party delude itself that just changing leader, going over to Burnham will solve the problems. And actually, implicitly, he attacks Burnham as well, because Burnham will represent a lurch to the left. And he says lurching to the left will be a major electoral mistake. So Blair doesn't like Starmer, doesn't think Starmer should be the Prime Minister, quite clearly. But he also does not think Andy Burnham should take over.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the point is he says that you can't just keep changing prime ministers. It's not a personnel question. And therefore, if Starmer was being challenged by somebody who had a completely clear alternative vision for the country, I mean, even the lurch to the left is unconvincing. That's what I was trying to say, is that Burnham is basically saying what he needs to do to get elected. We know that he's got a lot of support from the left wing backbenchers in the party, and we can fear what that might mean in terms of policy or not. But he's just not been clear on it. He just keeps saying, "I'm one of you. You know, I'm a local lad. I'm one of you, and I believe that people need change." And he says that regularly. I mean, how often did he say change and talk about himself when he was doing his opening speech? But it's not clear in what direction. What is it exactly that is going to change when he becomes the prime minister, other than that he will be even more in hock to the backbenchers who are supporting him at the present time? I'm unimpressed, I have to say.
Blair, in terms of some of the particulars, he said, you know,
Yeah.
the Labour government, as a matter of some urgency, needs to ditch Ed Miliband's nut zero mania, because that is a massive vote loser. People don't vote for higher energy prices. People don't vote for saving the planet if it costs them a fortune. So he says ditch that. He also says, well, don't lurch to the left generally, but he also says, you know, you must stop the boats, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Now, these are good suggestions, but what do you think? Burnham won't ditch net zero, will he? And I suspect, because he'll be all attached to the ECHR and, you know, the kind of woke open borders worldview, he won't stop the boats, whatever it takes either, will he?
So I think that on net zero, and it's worth saying that I don't agree with all of Blair's policy proposals, right? I'm not keen, for example, on his endless promotion of digital ID. But he is very clear about the fact that, you know, in order to have any power in the world or any strength at home, any way or capacity to change things for people, you need an economy that's healthy. That requires growth. And growth is not feasible or possible while we are attached to net zero. He even makes the point, even though he's much more, of course, pro EU than I am, he even makes the point, look, this is not serious politics. You can't just say we're going to just get closer to the EU and hope that will solve everything. Why are you trying to get closer to them? What is it exactly? And he makes the point, you won't be able to negotiate hard if you're coming from a position of weakness. In other words, it's an intelligent intervention. I mean, I don't agree with all of it, but, you know, it's like written by somebody who's really thought through the crisis and the problems, and they're existential problems that the Labour Party is having, and therefore for the rest of us as citizens, we're having because they're in charge, they're running the country. So net zero is very important. I think on the immigration point, he understands that if you can't control the borders, and that no amount of rhetoric is going to just mean that you do control the borders, then actually you can't be a sovereign nation state of any strength that anyone takes seriously. And I think that it's interesting that Andy Burnham has said, oh, yes, I won't undo anything Shabana Mahmood has said. But the problem that Labour have got is that for all their talking tough on immigration, they're not prepared to take on the judiciary at home in terms of human rights, or to take on the ECHR, which is the point that you've just made. And these things are necessary. And also, there are a whole range of international agreements that we're signed up to, that would mean, like the Refugee Convention, that mean that we have no sovereignty when it comes to making decisions about migration questions. We're not able to do all the things that we promise. And we can see that even though more people might be refused visas, or actually turned down for asylum, they're still all living in the UK. They're all still here, right? I mean, there's no point having a policy that says you're not allowed to be here, but then doesn't actually remove you, because you just have the growth of an illegal sector and economy, and so on. That's what all those shops on the high streets are, all those vape shops that are springing up left, right, and centre, and barber shops run by people who are here illegally.
I've just found, Claire, a fuller version of what Andy Burnham's response to Tony Blair was. He spoke to The Observer, he says that he believes Blair misunderstands the root causes of populism. He said, this is Andy Burnham talking about Tony Blair. This is quoting Andy. He doesn't mention inequality once. If you don't get how that's driving politics now, if you are not rooting your analysis in the fact that people are unable to live and that things that were taken for granted are no longer affordable, then you are not understanding what's going on. Andy Burnham, by the way, criticised 40 years of neoliberalism. Tony Blair was very fed up about that. He said, I assume he includes my government in that. So there's no love lost between Burnham and Blair. And we all want more equality. Nobody likes inequality, but I get very worried when I start hearing these socialists, these Labour people like Burnham going on about, oh, Tony Blair doesn't know what he's talking about, never mentioned inequality. It's too nebulous. It's too nebulous a concept to base your entire approach to politics around. We need practical reality, practical, real measures that make a difference, not just droning on about inequality.
And there's the thing about populism, the spirit of populism, not necessarily the way it's working out in terms of parties, which, to be honest, is less inspiring. The spirit of populism.
Yeah, populism. You know, I always like the way people say in political circles. You know, populism is a real pejorative term, and if you look at what the definition of populism is, the pursuit of policies that are popular with the people. Why is it that Westminster types hate that concept so much?
I know, but the spirit of populism is definitely to say we want better. But what the mistake is made is to always see it in terms of more economic, more money in a way. And so when they say inequality, they don't understand that what people want is pride in the places that they live. They want to have their views taken seriously. They want their culture. It's a much more cultural question. It's about not feeling constantly that the traditions, the outlooks, the points of view that you have will be disparaged as somehow and sneered at and looked down upon. And so I think that what Andy Burnham sounds like is like some kind of social worker who wants to help the poor people out. And I think that's condescending, and it's he that misunderstands what's going on. And at least Blair says, look, they feel as though they're so uninvested in society, the vast majority of people, and I agree with him on this, that they've got, you know, when somebody says it's a bit of a risk voting for that populist chap over there, they say, well, you know, I'll take the risk. Because the status quo with you lot in charge is not something I'm prepared to tolerate anymore with this slow, incremental non-change.
Exactly. Now, here's something to get excited about, Claire, something for you to look forward to. Andy Burnham has pledged that tomorrow he will issue a considered response to Tony Blair's essay. So I'm on the edge of my seat. I don't know about you, but that really is very...
He's got a new communications team, and they'll be all writing away overnight. You know, let me show you. There's a whole range of those kind of lanyard class types who kind of moved down to Makerfield, the constituency, not thinking it was a town and discovering it's a constituency, and they're all kind of offering their services so that he will have very slick response, I'm sure. But you should get him on here and do it. He can do it spontaneously.
He said to me, he said, I want to come on Talk and I want to come on your show as much as possible. That's what Andy Burnham wouldn't say ever. But he's welcome on the show anytime if he wants to come on. I'd love that. But you never know. Now, I've got to be careful here because there's the Makerfield by-election, and you know we're in Purdah rule, so we have to be very careful. So I just want to talk about reform and restore, not in terms of the Makerfield by-election, but there are fights on the right, Claire. What do you make of Reform UK's Zia Yousaf slapping down Robert Jenrick in public for, in Zia's belief, not getting Reform's deportation policy right on TV. Now, whether or not Jenrick got it right or wrong, I think is beside the point. I just think it's rather extraordinary for a party to be fighting in public like this. Surely the way you handle this is you phone up Jenrick and say, listen, mate, you got that slightly wrong. Be a bit careful in the future, and then handle it diplomatically. But this is like revealing a great big rats in a sack punch-up between various factions of Reform UK, isn't it?
It's unedifying, and it indicates a lack of discipline in the party, it would seem to me. And I hope that, they sort it out. I mean, I'm not, by the way, I'm no clearer at the end of this entirely what the policy is.
Nor am I. That's a good
I kept thinking, I've looked at their original policy, and what Zia said, I wasn't entirely sure he was right either. But the point is, look, it is such a shame, because I'm very positive about that spirit of populism, and it's looking for a vehicle, and Reform has, until relatively recently, been it, right?
Yeah.
And I would really hope that they get their act together. And I just think that this kind of spat in public isn't something that one associates with people who are serious. And I by the way, social media is great. I know it can be a sewer, but it can be a pain in the neck, and people say stupid things. But I do think people who are leading political parties should not be resolving their problems on social media. I'm all for transparency, but that just strikes me as being kind of immature. So it's a real shame, because I'm actually, I think Zia Youssef is very impressive.
Oh, no, they're a great media performer. I agree.
And I actually think, despite everyone moaning about him being a Tory, that Robert Jenrick's been a great asset, right, to Reform.
Yeah.
So I really would prefer that if they're going to have some sort of like boys falling out thing, that they would do it behind, closed doors. We're not interested, and it's doing damage, and they shouldn't have done it.
It does come across as a little bit amateur hour. And Rupert Lowe, his party Restore Britain, has been accused of sponsoring extreme anti-Semitism. Now, there's one character called Steve Laws who's kind of associated with Restore Britain, and he basically says that Jews should be deported because they're foreign, and some very extreme views. Now, Rupert Lowe's been approached about this and say, you're going to admonish this guy, and his response is, we do not police our membership. Now, I'm not for a second suggesting that Rupert Lowe agrees with what Steve Laws said, or I'm not even suggesting that Steve Laws is central to the Restore Britain equation. But when Rupert Lowe says we do not police our membership, well, if you're a political party, you kind of have to. You can't let people freelance with these ludicrously extreme views that make you look bad. So I would suggest Mr. Lowe's got to get his act together here, hasn't he?
It's not just that it makes them look bad. I mean, and it's not just Steve Laws. I mean, there's a load of neo-Nazis, and there's not a huge neo-Nazi fraternity in the UK, but they exist, right? And there really are some nasty, Jew-hating, foreigner-hating, hate the colour of people's skin types, right? They're a small minority, and it always is annoying that, the likes of Hope Not Hate will shout racist to anybody who's concerned about mass migration and put us all in the same category, right? But we should be able to call out people who have got vile, bigoted views, genuinely views which are intolerant to the extreme. And the problem is, if you just say, oh, I don't mind if they hang around Restore, then that is not a very good case for Restore. And if I can just say, I mean, I've just had a little tiny weeny bit of a spat. I'm looking at my phone now rather than I'm checking my social media, because I actually was taking up one of one of the core team around Rupert. He actually said that complaints about another anti-Semitic neo-Nazi type who had been has just been allowed to rejoin Restore. He sort of said, we at Restore Britain do not care for minoritarian moral fetishes. Anti-Semitism is not a minoritarian fetish, right?
Minoritarian, I like that word.
Well, of course, there's not very many Jews in the UK. So that apparently is some sort of like minority.
That is bad.
And it's vile, right? Because I can tell you,
I agree.
If you let anti-Semitism, right, rot at the heart of Britain, then Britain as a nation state is got no moral basis on which it can stand, right? This is not some identity politics whinge, which is what they're trying to imply. And so I do think that it's an unpleasant thing, and it's a shame. I'm sure lots of very good people support Restore. They think they're a bit different. They prefer Lothar Farage or whatever. I mean, I'm not really making a point on that front. I do, however, think that any party, freedom of association requires that you say we will only let people in who agree with us.
And you do...
If a load of Islamists decided to join Restore, would they say, "Oh well, we don't police our membership"? By the way, if a load of trans rights activists decided to join Restore, would they say, "Oh look, it doesn't matter. Let 1,000 flowers bloom"?
A political party does have to police its membership. It's as simple as that. Claire, great to have you on the show as always. Brilliant stuff from Baroness Claire Fox there. Now I'm going to read you because we refer.